By my watch, it is 11 on the dot. 11 a.m. Thank you all for showing up and for being interested in the talk. Hopefully we can have a good time the next hour. You're here for How to Learn to Stop Worrying and Love the Choom, Cyberpunk Operations in Real Life, because I wanted to make the longest title ever. And we're going to be talking about two of the things that I really love in my day-to-day, which is cybersecurity and video games and all that good stuff. My name's Jack. A little overview about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go through kind of what we're going to talk about here, some definitions of what I mean by hacking, what I mean by cyber operations. We're going to talk about hacking tools, everything in games and in real life, IRL. And we're going to talk about big hacks, or something like cyber operations, the big hacks that really change the way we think about the world, or change how the world works in games and in real life, because they have happened. And we'll talk about the future in terms of what predictive power cyberpunk media or cyberpunk games have for what might come next in the real world. And on a more lighter note, what like IRL hacks and like hacking and cyber operations might point to in terms of like game mechanics we can kind of sneak in there, because everyone's done a puzzle hacking minigame, and not all of them are great, but some of them can be great. All right, so who am I? Why am I here? I've been coming to MAGFest for a couple of years now. I've had this idea kick around in my head. Happy to do it. And I am a cyber threat analyst by trade. So I track cyber threat actors. I've done incident response, which is where you go to an organization and who's been totally hacked and find out how to recover. I mostly do cyber threat actor tracking. So that's identification and tracking of the techniques, tactics, and procedures and tools that cyber threat actors do. So that's criminal hackers as well as nation state hackers. If I use the term APT, I'm referring to advanced persistent threats. I'll try and minimize jargon, but those are like the big, bad, sophisticated cyber actors that I love to track. Outside of that, I've been researching these actors kind of as a more theoretical or academic way for a number of years now, and I teach a graduate course at Georgetown up the road on cyber operations and the role that those play in international relations and national security. And most importantly, I play a lot of games, play a lot of cyberpunk, and I've done some game dev in the long past life as well. So I kind of think about mechanics as I go through some of this stuff as well. Let's jump into it. Talking about hacking and cyber operations. So we've all played some game where we've had to do hacking, and I'm focusing on games that have like a cyberpunk vibe, and you kind of know what it is when you see it. I'm talking about Deus Ex, cyberpunk, obviously. Even Watch Dogs, we hit some of those and stuff like that. And whenever we're a protagonist in one of these games, hacking is a mechanic we use to do something, right? Use it to take advantage of our opponent's perceived strength. What might that be? The opponent might have things that on the surface make them stronger. Their own augmentations or enhancements. Or if you're breaking into somewhere, camera feeds, security systems, automated turrets, robots, what have you. Hacking generally is going to allow the player to take advantage of those things and turn those strengths into huge disadvantages, turning them totally on their head, or at least turning them off, making it easier to get around that area and get through lockdown zones. Hacking is about exploiting these systems or taking advantage of their vulnerabilities, which means identifying that vulnerability, whether it's an unlocked window, a sticky note on the machine with the password on it, or something that we have an exploit against, to break into the computer while slinking around offices or doing the Adam Jensen cover dance, or disabling enhanced optics from 20 feet away before you make your move, or knocking the lights out in a room, all that good stuff. We're exploiting something that exists to give us an advantage on the battlefield or against an enemy. The same is true for, so really just exploiting systems to gain advantage. One of the cyber operations, if we're talking about hacking, both in real life and video games, is exploiting to gain advantage of an opponent's system. So you have if you're a IRL hacker, you go into a company and you try and get into their organization's network. You try and get into their mail servers, and we'll give some more examples later on, and sort of use the things they use to give themselves strength, give the things that allow them to develop code, do their day-to-day job, and turn those into advantages for you. Make their spider web of networks, your spider web of networks, and allow you to get in, take all the stuff. It'd be very hard to do big hacks and steal intellectual property, steal good data if we didn't have the networks to back those up. So turn those to your advantage. What I mean by cyber operations, and we'll go into this a bit more, but basically just think a little bigger. Exploiting much bigger, more complex systems to gain a strategic or a bigger advantage. Cyber operations, in the way I define it, is usually carried out by the most well-resourced, most sophisticated, like long-term hackers and actors. These are usually in the real world government organizations or intelligence agencies or militaries and all that. In games, it gets a little more fun because you got corporations getting in there. You got some really badass hackers who are just good in their own right. IRL, it's usually going to be government organizations that can really crank out all that funding and all those resources to do to sustain these really big hacking operations, and to do what? To get some big strategic advantage that a big actor would care about. In real life, it could be spying on an adversary's government or military, what they're able to do. In games, it could be to have a massive effect, and I have a couple examples coming up on the world itself, and I picked out a couple examples there. And let's jump into it. Let's lay out some definitions. I'm going to say the word hack a lot today. And I want to lay out kind of like a framework or a way to think about hacking. If you've touched like IT or cybersecurity before, you might be familiar with this life cycle in some of its forms. This is the one I like to use. We want to think about it as a process that either in games or in real life, you're kind of going to step through all these steps. You'll start with reconnaissance, go into initial access, establish a foothold, expand your access, and then do the thing, whatever the thing is. In real life, you might be hacking into, again, a company or some like secret military base or something, and you try and get there. You try and get your initial access to the edge of their network, kind of weasel your way in, get into their more secure servers, and get to the designs for their new tank or new plane. Or if you're doing like military stuff, steal that. In games, it might be more zoomed in. Might be if you're playing a stealth V and not just a kill them all, cut them all up kind of against cyberpunk. It might be you want to get in and out of a place or a house to fulfill a mission or fill a contract, and do that quietly. So again, it's going to find those points to exploit and those ways to kind of quiet down security systems or knock people out really quietly. So let's go through like kind of the steps. Reconnaissance. The first step. You want to learn as much about your target as possible, both in games and IRL. What systems are online? What operating systems or software versions are they running? What augmentations do they have plugged in? Very importantly is what defenses are looking to hunt you out and sniff you out. We'll talk about more about that later. But basically, this is literally giving you a map, a network map, but a map of what you're up against. Do you have a match for these? Do you have a way to exploit onto these systems? And it's going to be essential in building up an understanding of what opportunities are available to you, both in real life and in games. Talk about, all right, is this the way forward? Like, can I proceed this way? Do I have the right abilities to exploit? And are there securities? Are the defenses low enough? And is their network of the right type that we can really take advantage of it and do something with this? Or am I going to have to break out the shotgun? In real life, the same thing is that some networks are going to be difficult to hack, and we'll talk about ways to get around that. Regardless, it's going to be scanning remotely. So the first thing is going to be kind of just like detective research. I'm going to throw some packets at a network, see what servers respond. Maybe they got a mail server on the outside. Maybe they got a web server hosting the website. And there are tools that we'll talk about in a moment about that. But this also includes knowing more about what's publicly known about your target in real life and in games, as well as the physical compound itself or the physical asset itself, because hacking can include more than just typing things into a computer, although that's most of the major stuff to me. Vulnerabilities don't need to be limited to cyberspace. I really like how the ping quick hack works in cyberpunk. Because if you upgrade it to the epic level, it enumerates everybody around there, and that's sort of like it's sort of like doing like a network scan or an nmap scan in cybersecurity, where you'd enumerate everything around an area, and you can see all your opportunities, which is exactly what you would do in real life as well. All right, so we've done our initial research, we've done some reconnaissance, we see some servers that are online, or some targets that are online, or we see a terminal that can be hacked that's over in the room next to us. This is probably the most difficult part you're going to be up against, getting that initial access. This is where you're going to throw a lot of crap at the wall, and not a lot of it's going to stick, but hopefully some will. In real life, you might find maybe a vulnerable old Windows version, like a Windows XP. I just love seeing that on the open web. Get into that, or it could be just an unlocked window, like a proper unlocked window you can get into, and then plug a USB stick in, or do what you're going to do in game. A very common one pictured here, common, kind of boring, but the most common is a phishing link. Sending a really realistic looking email. I'm sure we've all seen like examples of this in our own inboxes. It's like, oh yeah, this looks like kind of like it's from Microsoft. It looks pretty good. That link is pretty jank. It just looks bad. But it's a pretty good forgery. There are definitely much worse phishing examples. Other ways to do this IRL are exploiting vulnerabilities in systems. This is like what you think of as like proper hacking, where you see like, oh man, they're running that old file transfer protocol. I have an exploit on my shelf I can use to throw against that, and I can get in. I can use that as my way in right now. And another kind of boring one, but a really common one, is just use the usernames and passwords to get in. This is one that's kind of unified between games and real life. You can come across, like, I don't know if everyone sees, like, there's some common passwords in games. I always try 0451 because developers love to use that. But you can always kind of guess or find, like, little drops or Intel drops or audiobooks and save credentials for later, and that can be your way in as well. Dumpster diving is a great one, too. In real life, it works. But it's a way. Yeah, but literally, like the stuff that's thrown out can totally have credentials written down or post-it notes or whatever good stuff. You just need one user to be bad at defending themselves, and you can get in. All right. So initial access is the hardest part we talked about. And while none of the steps are really easy, once you get past initial access, you can kind of take a breath. Because you're now you're at least in the network. You're past just an outsider. You're in it in some way, both in games and in real life. So once you clear that hurdle, it's a good idea to make your life easier going forward. It's not always the case when you're hacking that you want to return to the network. Maybe if you're V and you're in cyberpunk, you just want to get into the building, get out. You're not going to come back. But maybe I kind of think of it. Well, it's not a cyberpunk example of like the Souls-like games where you may want to kick down that shortcut ladder, make it easier to get back here next time in case you want to come back. Unlock that window from the inside if you're Adam Jensen in Deus Ex, just to make it easier to come back if there's another side mission that comes back here. This is establishing a foothold. In real life, so the picture here is one of the early missions in Cyberpunk is where you go into the hotel and before everything goes bad, into the Konpeki Plaza heist. A big part of that is using the Flathead, which is a little fun robot drone that you drive around the hotel, and you use it to hook into, I don't know if it's lethal or not, but probably not pleasant, hook into the one netrunner defending the hotel's networks. What you've done is that you've kind of already got initial access as V. You're in the hotel, you kind of masquerade it as somebody that looks legit, as a different name, and then you use this Flathead, this robot, to take out the protection systems of the hotel. You're establishing your foothold, and you actually leave that guy, it's kind of hard to see in the picture there, but you leave that guy plugged into the netrunner for the duration of the mission before things go awry. But as a mission itself, before things go awry, it's a pretty good move. You can get back easily, and you're literally sitting on the defenses of the network, which is pretty sweet. In real life, is opening up a back door, laying down an implant that you can talk to later. So basically taking the system that was that you had to maybe jump through some hoops to get through or get onto a server in real life, maybe open up a new way in that's a little easier, a little less detectable, and doesn't require you to do the whole thing again and again. Because maybe it was really hard to exploit onto that Windows server. Maybe you just want to open up a port, make it easier to get on again, create a new username that's like hacker and password that you can just use to get in legitimately. Make your life easier going forward. But establishing a foothold is going to be a hallmark of a lot of cyber operations, if not all hacks. So now we want to expand access. And we're going to be iterating on this hack process as we go forward. Each network is a web, both in games and real life. And each time you're in that first node, you want to look around and reassess and see what's next. Every step deeper, you're going to scan for more opportunities to expand, to kind of weasel yourself in deeper, and really make it hell for the defenders, if they ever discover you, to find out where the heck you went, as I can attest to. So once you get initial access and you establish that foothold, you want to look for opportunities to expand further. This example from Prey 2017, where you got access to someone's email, and you're able to see credentials in their email inbox. So you get access to one person's email, you get someone else's credentials in that inbox you can use for a different computer that you can save in your notes for later. So you're using things that you find at each step to inform follow-on steps. This is the same as real life, where if you get onto a machine, maybe you get onto that mail server that's on the edge of a network or on the public-facing side of a network. Maybe there's some emails that have administrator credentials or credentials of any kind. You can use a username and password there to log into their system. And you're slowly like one step deeper, rinse and repeat. You get onto an administrator's machine, they're probably gonna have some good connections, maybe some good live connections you can ride to other parts of the network. So that's expand access is gonna be this kind of iterative process. We're gonna keep going and going until you can do the thing. Usually there's gonna be really one of two things, but I'll give a third one as a shout out. It's kind of a creepy one. One is stealing data. So you kind of call us like espionage or just taking stuff. If you're going in there for a mission that is to just learn something new, to accomplish a goal, to know what that company is up to know what that sketchy bio firm is up to in Deus Ex, you're going to get in and see what file exists on the computer. You might want to do something a little more violent. Want to knock that system offline, which is, I guess turning off is not that violent, but you can also have more destructive effects. You can add yourselves to the do not shoot list on the turrets and add all previously safe users to the not safe list, which is a bad time for them. In real life, this last one I think is really interesting because it's called an integrity attack, and it is modifying the integrity of data to make it not trustworthy. So what does that mean? Everything's about like stealing credit card data or stealing bank data or whatever is pretty bad. I think it'd be worse if a hacker got in there and modified what was there and didn't really do anything else. Just maybe change the amounts in some accounts. How much you trust data and trust systems that hold it, that causes much more panic than a little bit of offline time or a little bit of stolen stuff, in my opinion. This is not advice. Don't hack anything. It's just something I find scary and interesting. Yeah. I'm not going to go through how to hack anything, but like it's great to get into. And if you want to talk after the talk, I'm happy to tell you some resources. But just don't willy-nilly use some of these tools. To sum it up, any hack should require all these steps. And I'll say them again. Just getting recon to find those vulnerabilities, initial access to take advantage of those vulnerabilities you found, a foothold to take additional actions if necessary if you got to return or you want to keep doing it again and again, worming ever deeper into the network, expanding access, and then finally doing the thing, taking action. This is kind of, so like I said, this is true of games and real life hacking. And at each step in both games and real life hacking, there's ways to do these the most basic way, and there's usually tools that expedite how we do these. In real life, I'm gonna give some examples of tools, and in games, we're gonna be a lot of like the Quickhacks, the scripts, the upgrades, the things you plug in that kind of run through this process for you so you can focus on doing your job and not on checking every single thing, like the ability of that ping to expand access and all that stuff. I want to note as well, at each stage, this is a cat and mouse game, right? There are defenders in the network. And I think the best games that do examples of hacking demonstrate this. There's someone looking for you, looking for the threat. On the right there, this wasn't supposed to be a Deus Ex talk, but the more I made the slides, just like they did a really good job. So we'll talk about that a bit. On the left there is, just like it's a SIEM, it's a security event manager. I'm not sure what it stands for, but it's basically a centralized point that can view all this stuff happening in your network that a lot of security operations centers use for big organizations. These are the people hunting out the attackers, people who might not even know that attackers are in the network. They're looking for you, and at each of those steps that we went through in the life cycle, you're slowly raising the bar on detection. And if you're detected, you either got to move fast or you got to cover your tracks. So what about cyber operations? We talk a lot about hacking. Like I said, cyber operations take hacking and exploitation to the next level. In this context, I'm going to define cyber operations as an act exploiting computer systems that has a significant or sustained impact on the world. Usually with geopolitical or strategic implications, or affecting the security of many people. Cyber operations are typically carried out by the most sophisticated, most well-resourced actors, and we'll go through a couple in a moment, and in games and real life. First, though, let's talk about those hacking tools. It's all well and good to know about those 5 steps of the hacking life cycle, but we can speed that up in real life and in games, and we do all the time. Because you don't want to have to write that. Like it's cool seeing some of the hacking movies where you have someone like write the exploit and get the classic "I'm in the mainframe" line. But generally, you're going to recycle and use someone else's code, someone else's exploit, and someone else's tools, both in real life and in a lot of these cyberpunk games. So while the hacking kill chain gives us kind of like a way to think about it, we can think about optimizing each of these steps using tools. An obvious example is in cyberpunk. You can go to those netrunner shops and just buy scripts. You can buy Quickhacks. And the cost of them goes up based on how effective they are. You have to imagine these are all publicly known. They're just taking advantage of things that aren't patched or other problems, and we'll go into that in a minute. On the other side there is just a smattering of some, I guess, hacking tools, or some would be like administrative tools that are used to really speed up the hacking in real life. Tools like Mimikatz, Metasploit, Nmap. Nmap is a great tool that does basically the ping command from Cyberpunk in real life. It's super clean, super easy, and the Mimikatz is great for stealing out credentials and passwords from Windows machines, and we'll talk about Metasploit a bit more later on. But all these tools are going to be, we'll talk about tools and frameworks that we can use to plug in and speed up these processes and how games do them and how real hackers do them and how they kind of blend and merge. I was going to ask if anyone knows what game this is from, but... Huh?
Actually, yes. That's from Invisible Ink.
I like Invisible Ink. I was gonna, but it's not Invisible Ink. But I do like that game a lot. That's a reference. This is a game I actually didn't play, but I appreciate because the previous one, it's Deus Ex again. It's Deus Ex Mankind Divided, which looks a little funky. But I love that Invisible Ink I should have included. That's actually a good one. It looks similar. just again, like looking into this topic, I was like, what games really do hacking well? Because there's a million hacking games, and I did not, there's the BioShock pipe game. It's just, I guess hacking. It's not. I don't have an analog there. But Deus Ex really nails it, and not just with the aesthetic, not just with the world building, even though it does the corporate dystopia and all that stuff they're rendering. But this hacking minigame is so sweet and packs so much good, realistic knowledge into such a tight package. It walks this. So if you're not familiar, in the Deus Ex hacking game, you're gonna, whether it's like getting on a computer, in any system, it's gonna open up this hacking game, and you're gonna start at that green circle there, and it's gonna be you're gonna try and get to either the goal node or you're gonna try and knock out the red node. Both will give you the win state, and you're gonna move through different nodes or computers in the network. What's cool is that so you start green, everything's cool. At every step you take, there's a percentage based on your stealth stat or whatever other upgrades you have, a percentage of detection chance, which I think is excellent. And at each step you take, when you sort of exploit forward onto that box, it takes a little bit of time, maybe 5, 10, 15 seconds, depending on your difficulty. And then as that ticks on, the longer you take, the detection goes up, and you're sort of doing this race where you're doing lots of clicks really quickly to move through the network, either really quickly or really deliberately. It's such a really refined way of getting a lot of good stuff. And again, this a lot of the hacking mechanics I'm talking about aren't meant to be realistic or simulations. These are all meant to be games, right? This is meant to be interesting ways to portray hacking, but this does a little bit of both. I think they did a really great job. And what is also demonstrated here is this is sort of the application of a framework. Like Adam Jensen isn't a hacker. You can kind of spec him that way, but he clearly has some mods installed that allow hacking. That he has these mods installed that's going to interface and visualize this network. He has mods installed that allows him to do these like bomb viruses in there and move through the network. He himself is not writing the exploits. He's not making the commands that go from thing to thing. He's sort of interfacing with a framework or a tool set that already exists. Which is sort of the same thing that's applied in real life. There's a number of these hacking frameworks, exploit frameworks I'll call them, that really just package up a bunch of scripts and tools other people have written. Metasploit's a favorite. There's a lot of other ones like Sliver and other stuff. Metasploit's definitely the biggest one to play with. It's just a prepackaged collection of scripts that do all the stuff you might need to do some hacking at each step of that the hacking life cycle. What would that mean? It'll have scripts to do your scanning for you. Pretty easy. Throw some packets at a bunch of ports on machines. Give you a report, nice clean report of what's there. You can also pair it up and say, all right, do the scan, find the services that are running. Let's say you have a file server or a media server, and it's running a file transfer software version. Or let's just say we'll make it easier. We'll call it we'll just do like a file transfer server, and that file transfer software is a little outdated. Maybe it's like from a couple of years ago. And it's really well known that anything below version 2.5 has this bug, this publicly known bug that can be exploited. So you as just like kind of lone hacker, you can be like, oh man, they're running version 2.4, that's awesome. I personally do not know how to write exploits. That's very difficult. I'm not a very good coder at all. But you can go to Metasploit, look it up, say, oh, match that to that, and then you can just load that up into a payload, fire it away, and it will do its best to give you a shell or give you remote code execution or commands you can execute on that machine, all packaged together without you needing to know how to write a single line of code. Metasploit is mostly used in a command line like it is pictured here, but there's actually GUI versions of it as well, which are pretty sweet. Speaking of GUI versions, I wanted to expand a bit more to we're kind of getting closer to the view from Deus Ex, or Invisible Ink in that way, is that the post-exploitation command and control framework is a long way of saying it's a way to view how you're hopping through the network. Like you can see in this one here, this one's called Havoc. I haven't used it before, but it looks pretty sleek. You can see the little lightning bolts around some of the computers. Those are the ones that we, as the hacker, own at this point in time. And yes, a lot of purist hackers in the real world are kind of frown at using a graphic user interface, but I think this is pretty excellent. You can literally right-click some of these machines and say exploit, assuming you have a matching exploit and the machine's running the software that you're gonna hack into, and it will just update the interface. It'll keep the report going, and you're sort of walking through it like Jensen. It's awesome, and stuff like this is getting pretty common. And these are all public post-exploitation command and control frameworks and frameworks that are just available and free. There are some ones that are more powerful because you can exchange money for goods and services. You can actually buy with money that I don't have, very powerful exploits. So it's kind of the trade-off with in Metasploit. there's no free beer. There's no what would be called 0-day exploits or ways to get onto a machine that is that will work every time. You're relying on the version to be out of date, the person who owns the machine to have not patched the system, which is cool. And honestly, that works for a lot of jobs. If you're doing like penetration testing or getting into hacking, it works a lot. Legal hacking, it works a lot. But sometimes you want to expand upon that and be able to get onto more difficult or highly protected systems. With money, you can. We see this in games, obviously, with the shops and the systems there. We have examples here. Got to throw some Mass Effect in there. Again, Cyberpunk again. The Netrunner shops are a great example of this. You can exchange your money for these exploits, for these quick hacks that superpower your ability to exploit onto or exploit targets that you want to take advantage of for a price and at different levels. Even in Mass Effect, which isn't really a hacking game in any way, but it has a hack module you can plug in, and I'll allow it because Shepard's not a hacker at all. But you plug that in, it expedites your ability to hack later on. I guess if you do attack Shepard, you could, but that's beside the point. And the bar keeps rising. So you got your free stuff in Metasploit, nothing that's going to be super powerful, but it'll work on a lot of the common devices or things that are unpatched, things where the owner of the device has failed to patch it. Same with sort of like the lower equity, lower quality, like Quickhacks and Cyberpunk. It'll work on a lot of the systems, and it'll get you through some of the areas, but the highly secured areas are probably going to want something more powerful, something that isn't available to everyone in the universe, and really you don't ever see, at least in universe, used against you because it's private, because it's really expensive, because it's not available. In Cyberpunk, for example, the most legendary exploits have a crazy high price tag and are referred to as like ultimate quick hacks. My favorite is System Collapse, because they just fall down. They just fall down. And you have to imagine that that's not really that available in the universe. Otherwise, it wouldn't hold up very well. With a lot of money or with a lot of crafting, your V is able to plug that in, to slot that, and use that effectively to just absolutely run rampant through areas. There are much more powerful ultimate quick hacks too, which are more violent as well. But really, it gives you a lot of power to run through. I would kind of equate these to what would be referred to as 0 days in the real space. 0 days is kind of a weird term, but it's used for exploits in real life that are used against a vendor device before the vendor is aware of the exploit existing. What does that mean? It means that you find an exploit, you don't tell anybody about it. You don't tell the vendor about it. An example of this, let's say you are looking to hack into a phone or a device or a mobile phone, and you're like, man, I wish I get onto that, to my that company's CEO's iPhone. That'd be great. But their upgrade to iOS 18 or whatever we're on now, it's pretty secure. There are no known exploits against iOS 18.2 or whatever we're on now. But are there any unknown ones? If I know the right circles and have the right contacts, there's actually a whole cyber mercenary marketplace that exists in the real world that's doing very well and kind of sketchy. That's at about $12 billion valuation worldwide in the last few years, which is with a B. And there's been a lot of really good, really excellent journalism done by like Citizen Lab and other organizations to track some of these spyware organizations that sell these 0 days, these spyware, these powerful freaking exploits that mostly are bought by governments and you could say some nefarious actors. But you can buy these. So they're not available. They're not public like Metasploit, but you can run these exploits and run these kind of ultimate quick hacks, ultimate exploits onto iPhones, onto devices, if they exist, and get on for free. Kind of get, well, not for free, you're spending a lot of money, but allows you to get that initial access, the hardest part done. So the downside is on both these is that they're limited, right? They're limited to who you know or how many resources you have, what level you are, what you have access to, or a special netrunner. The System Quick Hack description says it was like the pet project of a corporate netrunner. Imagine it's one guy, and he's probably super dead, but you're able to acquire it by your connections and your means. It's not just something that's out there. And the same with some of these really powerful spywares that are that these vendors might have. Beyond tools, let's talk about cyber operations, the big hacks, the things that really reshape our reality, reshape our world, and the things that have happened already so far. I've scoured some of my favorite cyberpunk e-games and picked 2 strong examples. Well, I'll talk a bit more about later, but I was surprised that I wasn't able to find more than these strong ones. Maybe when we get to Q&A at the end, I can hear if there's other ones I've missed, because I thought I would find a lot more. Maybe there's a gap for that. All right, I don't know why I put a spoiler tag in here. This game is from 2011, and there's probably people who attended MAGFest this year who were born after that. But Deus Ex Human Revolution has a really good example. If anyone's familiar, there's the backdoored biochip, which is a really cool mission, a really cool mechanic. And this is mid-game. It's not like it's been a long time. So basically, in this universe, everyone has a lot of augmentations, a lot of things slotted into you at various parts of your body. The biochip being a key part of that. And there's these there's like glitches happening with everyone at this point in the universe, early in the story. And there's like weird little glitches, little hallucinations. It happens to you. It happens to your UI. It's just kind of annoying. And you hear reports like, oh man, you should go to the limb clinic, which is like the medical clinic that does these upgrades, does these surgeries for augmentations, and you just get that upgraded. Like you're at version 2, put it to version 3, we fixed it, we patched it out, good to go. And you're encouraged to do that by a lot of people. If you dig around some emails and some side quest stuff, you can start seeing there's something nefarious going on, but you can just say yes. And you can take the patch, and we're going to say that in this version of the playthrough, you as Adam Jensen said, yeah, I want to get patched. I'm tired of these little bugs in my UI. All right, so a few moments and missions later, things happen, and right in the middle of one of the major boss fights in the end of the game, you're knocked down super hard. And it makes the boss fight really annoying because all your augmentations are knocked out or like sabotaged, and you're basically, it turns out, the Illuminati, which is literally what the organization is called. The Illuminati created this bug to control or otherwise tamper with people, and there's other stuff in the lore there too. But it's able to knock you offline if you accept that patch. So in this case, the biochip turned out to be backdoored and co-opted by an anti-augmentation extremist. What's to learn from this? This is a textbook supply chain attack, which is becoming in much more vogue. And what makes a supply chain attack possible is that whether you or I am using software gets updated. That's good. Good security, good functionality. Software gets updated. We trust Apple. We trust the people who develop our apps. We trust Microsoft to every now and then push down an update. That's good. That's good stuff. Don't stop updating. But that's an inherently trusted connection. Just like people going to the limb clinic in the Deus Ex universe, that's an inherently trusted relationship where they're accepting, yeah, give me that code, give me that firmware upgrade, give me that new Microsoft OS, give me that new Apple OS, which you should do. But that is a single point of failure that you are relying on the security of that organization to be strong, to not be either hacked by someone else or in Deus Ex co-opted by some evil, nefarious Illuminati organization. Supply chain attacks are super powerful because if you can slip a hidden backdoor, it allows the nefarious actor not only access to free access to a device, it allows you to pick your target, to access a ton of devices. If you were able to, to note, you're relying on the defenses of the vendor, right? Microsoft, Apple, that stuff. I'm gonna say they're pretty good, but you might have some apps, like maybe Snapchat or some weird apps on your phone that you use, or Guidebook. I'm not disparaging Guidebook. The developers of Guidebook might be easier to hack than Apple. Is all I'm saying. Don't do it. But if you did, the trusted update process might filter down and give you a hacker a free channel onto that device. You don't have to hack the operating system. You can just ride the update in with a little backdoor, and it won't do anything at first. It'll just be there listening, waiting for you to come back to it, just like the biochip was. Like Jensen was totally compromised when the biochip upgrade happened. Nothing happened until the attackers wanted something to happen. These are getting more and more common. There are actually quite a few examples of supply chain attacks in the real world. SolarWinds is one of them. I'll talk about another one in one moment. It really comes down to what software you choose to go after, whether you're in universe, in game, or if you're going after something in the real world. Like again, not going after the big guys, but what if you go for something boring, your government makes you download some accounting software that you have to do to manage your accounting once a year. Everyone uses this one piece of software. It's like TurboTax or something. You got to do it. Wouldn't it be bad? Wouldn't it be a bad thing if that was compromised? If that update process was totally compromised? This is a big capital C, capital O cyber operation. It's called NotPetya. It's considered by reporters to be the most devastating cyber attack in history by cost. Which is, I think, a pretty fair bit. So let me set the scene, because this is a fun one. Early 2017, a group calling itself the Shadow Brokers, which is a Mass Effect thing, claims to have stolen a powerful zero-day exploit from the National Security Agency, which is the U.S. intelligence agency most well known for hacking. After a series of demands and rants on Twitter by this Shadow Brokers thing, the group released the tools in April 2017 to the public. These really powerful tools, this stuff that would not be in Metasploit, got released to the public, and now it is in Metasploit, actually. Experts who review the code pretty much unanimously agree, yeah, this is pretty bad. These are really powerful. This doesn't seem like a lie. One in particular was called Eternal Blue. in the release files, and it was a beast. It was an exploit that could really trivially access any Windows machine, fully patched or whatever, providing remote code execution on anything. That means you didn't have to log in. You could just see a Windows machine on the internet and just throw it, and you're on. It's nuts. Very scary. This was April 2017 when that got released. Also, in or around June of 2017, so a couple months later, probably before actually, some hackers gained access to a small accounting company in Ukraine. Not a big deal. I'm sure it's fine. But the accounting software they use was sort of like TurboTax in the US, but kind of, honestly, a little janker. And that every company installs it. It's literally regulated that every company had to install it to do their annual accounting. The hackers got into that update server for that software. And we're like, hey, I assume they were like this. I assume the hackers said that they could take that Eternal Blue, just package it into that thing, and then use that to deliver from the accounting software update server to everyone who downloaded the update and give them a backdoor access to everyone. So it's a supply chain attack with a really powerful 0-day, an attack you can't defend against right now. It was patched later on. And they included Eternal Blue in their sent down malware. They did something else so fun, which is that they let their malware kind of run itself. It can just automatically do what it wants to do. And it said, hey, malware, even if we can't talk to you, just replicate yourself. Look for devices around you. Run through the whole 5-step hacking lifecycle on your own. If we can just script that. And if you see someone you can exploit with Eternal Blue, do it. Then install yourself. Then copy yourself. Then do it again. Establish a foothold. Expand your access. Keep doing the thing. Automatically. Eternal Blue was so effective in this NotPetya attack that not only did it take much of Ukraine offline, but it spread beyond Ukraine. Worldwide contamination happened in hours, taking down major global logistics organizations. I'll highlight Maersk for one, because it might not be something that you're familiar with, but it does all the global shipping that moves everything, and a ton more organizations. This thing was a big deal, and it would basically ransomware every device. This was nuts. This would, I think, fit very well in a cyberpunk story, but it is our reality. This is, I think I would agree with this being one of the most devastating cyber attacks that has happened, and I will give some more on that in a moment. I want to do the abridged version of this one because I think that, like I said, looking for some really big cyber operations, let's get more creative. Let's get more crazy. The abridged version. So anyone who's a big cyberpunk, like deep in the lore, I'm sorry. I do my best. But in brief, what's data crash in the black wall? Data crash is what happened when a very talented, very capable hacker left behind in the cyberpunk universe, left behind malware in all the corporations that, when he died, would trigger and leak all their private secrets, just open up their network to the world. It's like, yeah, like a big screw you to the man. A side effect of this was when you open those up to the world, that a lot of those corporations were working on military stuff. You know, that's fine, including military AIs, really nasty, powerful AIs that at this time in the universe were, pretty nasty. And they left those conclaves on the corporations and entered the public internet. Did lots of damage. Led to like a sort of dark age in the cyberpunk universe. It was a big deal. Eventually, the organization NetWatch was able to create another AI, basically, that was able to kind of just carve out a place using, they call this thing the black wall, carve out a place in the internet, which is totally on fire right now for humans to interact with, which mostly blocks the AIs. And you can, play the game or do any cyberpunk stuff to see that it doesn't do it all the time. But this is an example of kind of unintended consequences of a super big cyber operation that happened. The hacker that did data crash probably didn't intend for all this to happen, but the fallout, just like NotPetya, was nuts and very powerful. Talk about hacking tools, talk about what hacking is, talk about cyber operations. Just what kind of want to go into some takeaways for the future. What is our cyberpunk future, or our cyberpunk present in a lot of ways, and what we'll talk about with how we think about real hacks and bring that down into the game mechanics world, which is super interesting, and given a lot of creatives here at MAGFest, I appreciate your feedback on that. And what do the extremes of what do the extremes of sci-fi and cyber operations and cyberpunk really say to forecast what's coming in the future? If we have any ideas. First off, is honestly, if anyone does hack, like IRL hacking is fun. Like people who do penetration testing, who do like legal hacking and stuff, not illegal stuff, who do legal hacking, set up capture the flag competitions, and sort of have conferences that have honestly a similar vibe to MAGFest, to penetrate networks. They just kind of play around in sandboxes, and it's fun. It's really a fun, like you call it, gameplay loop. The hack life cycle that's basically what it is. And there must be a reason that they do this. They do this usually outside of their work hours. A lot of them love to. A lot of them love to set it up just because they really like it. I've had fun with these before as well. Like I said, hacking in games doesn't always have to be meant to be a simulation. BioShock can keep doing his pipe game. That's fine. However, hacking in games can be more, especially if it serves the aesthetic. If it serves the cyberpunk vibe. You want to feel like a hacker. You want to feel like you're doing something that's like messing with the network, or I'm in. You want to have that I'm in moment, or like get into the mainframe or whatever. And there is also a place for games that do try and simulate it. Hacknet is excellent. If even honestly, Hacknet somehow it's not. I don't think it's intended to teach you about command line stuff, but it sort of does by accident. It's an accident. It has a narrative on the background. It gives you like a pseudo command line to play with, and you're doing this kind of cyberpunk adventure. So I think that there's opportunities for both the creation of like more simulated-y hacking games that go through some of the examples we talked about today, as well as stuff that's a little more creative, like the Deus Ex examples, or stuff that really just makes you feel like you're in the universe or feels like you're into it. I think they more can be done there. And I'll say again, a lot of games have hacking mechanics, hacking puzzles, and hacking stuff, which is great. And it's fun creative, even if they're just like puzzle games. There are not a lot of cyber operations as mechanics or cyber operations as gameplay that I'm aware of. Not a lot of big ones. Like these, the examples I gave were things that happen to you that you play through, but not a lot where you're doing the cyber operation. And I think it'd be kind of fun to be the big bad actor, to be the one who's doing those big, well-funded, iterative cyber attacks or planning those operations. That sounds kind of neat, kind of heisty, and I'm just not familiar with a lot of games that offer that. Last up, science fiction is a great way of predicting the future. It can be. William Gibson, who is the author of Neuromancer, which is a great book that coined the term cyberspace, which is cool. And in the foreword that he wrote a couple years after the initial release, mentioned that he's like, yeah, everyone's like, oh man, you predicted the internet. You did such a cool job. It's like, yeah, I got bad, but all my people used payphones still. Like, it's great predictive. It's good predictive power, but it's not telling us what's going to happen. It's a good way to play around and think about what might be possible, what might be able. I'm not saying the future will look like cyberpunk or look like Deus Ex, but I bet some of it will. I bet some of it will be correct, and we'll look back like that was prescient. That was nice. So what do I think? We can go extreme with the data crash thing. AI malware. The AI is going to get out. Maybe down the road. I'm not sure if we're there yet. I think you need to miniaturizing an artificial intelligence, miniaturizing an LLM is still up there, and I think that there's ways that they can be used to find exploits, to intelligently do that, which we might see. I think more imminently is the scary thing we've seen already is the automation of malware, not intelligence. Just like what we see with a lot of these cyber operations and hacking is that most of the publicly known cases of cyber operations, the hackers were really stingy about wanting to be real-time connected to that guy. Like, obviously in computers, you can script a lot of things, you can automate your life, it's great. But for some reason in these cyber operations, the hackers generally want to have a live connection when they're doing something. And then they leave out, because they leave a back door, right? And they come back later. But when they're doing something, they want to be there live. That takes time, that takes effort. If you automate that stuff, you can, save time and effort, but you get examples like NotPetya, where you have something automated, you script something, and in that case, it seems like every indication was that the intent was not to infect the world. It seemed like the intent, like most reporters agree, it was like a Russian government thing against Ukraine, big surprise, that their intent was to just target organizations that use the accounting software, which it sped well beyond of. It seems like this was a cyber accident, which I think is another thing we might see in the future. Things that weren't intended, things like data crash that had a goal, had a hack, had something sick, and then went well beyond the bounds of what was supposed to happen, what was intended to happen. And through automation, I think I'd be surprised that didn't happen in the near future, and in the mid-tier future, but who knows? Unsurprisingly, corporations with greater and greater volumes of data collected about us is kind of a point that's been beaten to death, because it's so true. I think it was attributed to, because the question was not like which group was NotPetya. There's a lot of names and honestly a lot of sick art of what they look like. Like Fancy Bear looks rad. I think it was Fancy Bear or Cozy Bear, which are both the names that the organization CrowdStrike uses to designate major threat actors, and those are both because there's a bear. It means it's Russia. That's their naming convention. I think it was Fancy. I think you're right though. Fancy Bear sounds right. And then the last thing to hose out for Q&A is just like there's optimism here. Like we're at MAGFest, it's fun, it's cool. Think about these game mechanics, and think about there's also some hope in real life for defense, right? In all these cyberpunk universes, there's like ICE, or like intrusion detection systems that are very effective. AIs are used to defend. There is hope there, and maybe there's some defensive prediction as well. It's not all like super violent and cool or terrible, but it's interesting to think about. That's all I have. Thank you all for coming, and I'm happy to stay around for questions. We got another 50 minutes or so. Yeah, in the back first.
My dissertation was on social network analysis.
Nice.
Slightly sideways from that. So you talk about the steps of hacking the system, IT system.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that I think has the same structure and equally important and equally of interest to those nation states is the hacking of the social recommender algorithm. So not hacking, right? But the way
Yeah.
to influence response to networks and things like
Absolutely.
that and Twitter and so on. There's a lot of games that explain to everybody good information about cybersecurity. There's nothing for information on privacy or on social recommender algorithms.
That's very cool. And I'll paraphrase that in probably a less eloquent way. The question comment is about like a lot of this focus on like IT system hacking, but there's not a lot about like the kind of the information zone, or like the recommender algorithms and the bots that are sort of like hacked to influence you. Yeah, so it's that's a whole area where there's not a lot of built-in defense. I think we've all kind of gotten to a point where we're a little more secure in our IT stuff. Like we're smarter. We get our text codes before we log into our banks for the most part. But we're probably not as fluent in protecting our recommendation algorithms too.
Can I
Yeah.
do a follow-up question?
Sure.
Quick? Why do you think you guys did so well at getting into the public media and game space and movies and so on, and like these other neighboring fields we haven't been able to make ourselves cool?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Because like, okay, yeah. So it's why, because like hacking is so in the game space. That's why I hear and that's why I love it so much. It's cool. Why it's in there? So why isn't stuff like that cool? I think it's hacking has a pretty long history compared to some of these newer fields, like these recommendation bots, and it's a little more abstract and kind of in the air. That's a good question though. It's like if we can make things cool, make the kids get into it. I think I really do think that it's sort of like the media around hacking. It has a sort of like grunge streak. It kind of blends well into other cultures and subcultures, and I think it just takes time to develop that for the other ones. That's a good point though. That's a question there. Yeah.
My comment.
Yeah.
Question after, but about just getting good visualization going really helps start that chain of getting into the popular culture. If you can easily visualize and present to people in an interesting way.
Yeah. The comment being like visualization is really a big key there. I totally agree. Yeah.
So my question for you is, given the way cyber operations and hacking is
Mhm.
sort of like a week to week, things change, new theories come out. Do you have any recommendations for ways to keep up on what's going on?
Ooh, yes. The question is ways to keep up on the comings and goings of cyber operations and hacking. I tell most of my students with that question. You find a good news feed. I mean, Twitter would be Twitter, X, whatever. Still has some decent feeds on that stuff that are going away, unfortunately. But I use some good resources for if you're into tracking this field as it moves. You just gotta find those resources you trust. Kind of like finding a good Discord or Slack channel. So I personally really like. Dark Reading is a really good resource online for weekly news podcast. Risky Biz is excellent, and then for more like longer form journalism, Darknet Diaries is killer. But yeah, I use Risky Biz to keep up on the week to week stuff. But yeah, it's really fast moving. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Question. Yeah.
I'm interested in this mostly from like an international relations standpoint.
Nice.
An exchange student at George Washington University.
Nice.
And I guess one of my questions was like, using the lens of video games and like cyberpunk fiction, how do we think like interstate conflict will develop? Because like,
Yeah.
I can see from like one of the things that stood out to me in cyberpunk is like the autonomous turrets with like facial recognition, you can like switch them to
Yeah.
your side. Do you think it will take like more of that route, or like the kind of more covert side, like the operation in Iran?
Oh, this is a great question. This is like my semester. Okay. So.
I'll take your thoughts. Why not?
Yeah, just jump on it. We just do a little GW to Georgetown thing. The question was, let me rephrase it. How do we see these cyber operations playing out in like the international relations space and like interstate conflict stuff? I mean, there's just so much. I think between like in cyberpunk, right? You hack the turret, you knock it down, and you really mess with what we call like identifier friend or foe, or IFF systems, to be like, I'm a friend, I'm a foe, and just flip that to be true false, and things get really messy. I think that's cool, and I think there's like I'll have to slide out, but there's like an idea of like tactical stuff, like on the ground, like I guess you could say like during war, or like the tactical things that switch to that, like systems. But I do think that cyber operations and that sort of access lends itself more to like that subtle influence. Like you kind of like kick something in one direction. Like the big takeaway from my course is mostly that cyber operations are kind of like any other tool of statecraft. You got your sanctions, you can invade, you can do diplomacy, you can give money for development. These are all ways for, regardless of like the ethical part of each one or the balance of each one, ways for a state or a nation to be like, I want the world to be like that. I want that country to do what I want them to do. So I do think that these lend themselves well. I think that cyber operations are better viewed through a lens of like espionage or covert stuff than as another like cyber force rollout or something. I think that's backed up by the most recent cases as well. Good question. All right. Yeah, in the back there.
Yeah, as we were around the game side of things,
Yeah.
we kind of associate hacking with tech game genre, so cyberpunk, et cetera. And then, as a result, like hacking is cool, we expect these mini games to be like fun, we expect them to be satisfying puzzles sort of because of the theme. But then a lot of what you find is like the Wordle or whatever, it's not.
Totally.
It's not really a hacking game, it's a hacking flavored puzzle. But at the same time, as if you can kind of hack the hack life cycle in other game genres, it doesn't have to have anything to do with tech. You can have those that move through those stages for like research things in the same
Yeah.
things like that. So I wonder if there's like any value to consider hacking as like a genre of game mechanics, and in of its own self.
Yeah.
Is that a thing that people talk about?
I think that's great. I think a lot of times they get slotted into like, as the question is like, hacking as a game mechanic is usually tied to like tech stuff or like doing like like your computers and stuff. But it can be much more broad, right? It can be other genres. It can be other story genres and other like game genres beyond that. I mean hacking, honestly, it gets slated in with like the puzzle, a little mini game puzzle that you use to move forward. Which I think it can be more than, but I think if we were to abstract sort of one of my points earlier is that the hacking works so well in Deus Ex because they lean into its tie to the material. I think there are examples of like in fantasy games, sort of like Skyrim. Let's say lockpicking. It leans into what's interesting about that. Or if you were, I don't have an example. If you were casting like a control spell in a fantasy genre, lean into the mechanics of that, and maybe not just a wordle or not just to spin the puzzle till the ball looks right, but make it so that it doesn't feel like you're opening your phone and playing Wordle. You're actually like the Skyrim lockpicking game is actually, you can do it the whole time. I'm sure there's been a talk on lockpicking games before, but like that is you're in there, and it makes it cool, makes it interesting, makes you feel like you're doing a thing. But you can do that with things that don't exist too, like doing like mind control or doing disabling of enemy options or removal of enemy options from the table. I think just rethinking about how like mini games for progression work to be more tied in with the story mechanics or the story you want to tell. Cool. No question. Yeah.
This is just personal favorite question. Like of all the, games you played that did have the hacking minigame, which one was your favorite?
All the games I played that had a hacking minigame, which is my favorite. It gets tied up in nostalgia real quick though, don't it? I do like Deus Ex, but that's too easy. Shock. Invisible Link's really cool. I like that. It leans into it really well.
I like it because it's integrated.
Oh gosh, that's a good one. I would say if I don't say Deus Ex or Cyberpunk, this is actually one that like it's kind of lame, but I got really into it. Batman. I really like the Batman signal hacking game. I like if you hold like the controller and you have the two nubs that Batman also holds, and it matches the waveform, whatever. That feels really good. It's less technical hacking, but it is like RF jamming, RF intercepting is also another real thing. So I think that just feels really nice, and it's fun to just feel like you're doing the same thing he is on screen. So that's my other one that's outside Deus Ex. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, one here.
Unrelated to video games, because you said you did threat identification and attribution as your day job. Did anyone ever figure out who Gia Tan worked for?
Gia Tan was the Microsoft?
XZ.
That was the Exchange exploit?
No, XZ as in the open source compression utility.
Oh, yes, that was cool. Was that this year? That was like
That was, I think, back in January.
that's a good example. Yeah, so this is another supply chain attack about and the supply chain attacks are great against boring stuff. Find the most boring, nothing software that everyone uses and just get in there. XZ, I believe, was like a publicly maintained compression tool. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's still.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and which is great because public open source software is really cool. But this developer was able to get trusted by the community and then push some code to it that led to some backdoors and exploits being pushed out to everybody. And it wasn't found for a while, I think. To answer your question, actually, no, I actually don't know. I don't know. It has all like the smell test. It smells like state stuff. But as far as who, I mean, the biggest actors in the space are like the U.S., Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. And some other guys that are popping up now. So keep it. So some newbies to the scene as well. Yeah.
The fan theory is Israel, but I don't remember.
Oh, Israel's very good too. Yeah. I honestly don't know. I'm not caught up on that, but I haven't seen anything definitive yet. Yeah. Let me do one for someone who has a question. Yeah.
Do you know anything about, or I guess, like, has there been any updates on the time someone tried to poison, like, the dependencies of SSH library?
Yeah, same. Yeah, and that was also, I think, last year. Yeah, so same. SSH, even bigger. SSH is the utility you use to remotely connect to Linux machines, and it's ubiquitous. And someone did the same thing, where they were able to get trusted, push code into the SSH binary, or the SSH like common binary that usually is reviewed really well, but it was able to provide a backdoor. And the answer is no. I don't know. It smells like nation state, because usually if it's not nation state, like, it's kind of getting lame. Like, there was this whole time where like Anonymous was like this big thing, and it was like kind of like that like cyberpunk thing, and like because cyberpunk's less about governments doing it and corporations, but about like individuals being able to like express themselves in that way. So now that we're past that for a while, there hasn't been a lot of like sub-nation state stuff anymore, but maybe it'll come back. It's just all these systems get more and more complex, more and more difficult to hack, and the money has to be behind something with a lot of money, which is usually a government. But I don't know, yeah, unknown. All right, one more?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you have ever played Exapunks?
No, I haven't. What's it called? Exapunks?
It's one of the Zachtronic puzzle game series, but it's like the hacking game.
Nice.
It's kind of like Uplink, where it's hacking focused.
Nice.
It's actually writing very, very simplified code.
That's cool. I will look up Exapunks. That sounds awesome. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I hope to see more games and stuff like that. But yeah, that's cool. Thanks. All right, we got one more minute. If anything else. All right. Well, thank you all again for coming on this Sunday MAGFest. I'll hang around for a little bit if you have any questions you want to ask. But yeah, you guys have been great. Thank you.